Hi, everybody. Peter Diamandis here. This is the first in a sequence of videos in which I'm going to be speaking about a series of supplements that are labeled Lifeforce. First off, I went to medical school. I'm not a practicing physician. Secondly, I am a co-founder of Lifeforce, so I want to put that full disclosure out there. Tony Robbins and I wrote this book called Lifeforce that talks about all of the breakthroughs going on across the range of biotech, healthspan, nutraceuticals to extend your vitality and your health span. The Lifeforce supplements are really an orchestra of components, each one individually orchestrated to provide certain benefits, like nutraceuticals for cognitive alertness, or for health span, or for NMN we'll be talking about, and also for what we call peak rest. It's a $70 billion industry, and God knows there are a lot of choices out there. What I'd like to do is bring on with me the individual who is the creator of these products. Hector, good to see you, my friend.
Likewise, Peter. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, no, a pleasure. And you're so brilliant on your sort of convergent thinking on these technologies that I really wanted to take the time to slow it down for people to understand what supplements you've been formulating and creating and why. But first, let me take a second to introduce you. So Dr. Hector Lopez, MD, he's the head scientific and innovation advisor for Lifeforce. We turned to him to really help us create a set of products that we want for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for people who have read the book. Just a little bit of background, because there's nobody I found that really brings all of these different elements together. He's the chief medical officer and co-founder of the Center for Applied Health Sciences. But even more so, and what really impressed me, Hector, and I want to talk about this a second, you're the chief medical officer and co-founder of the Supplement Safety Solutions company. And you handle the post-market safety, sort of the surveillance for a set of dietary supplements and products, over 60 brands, sort of what you call nutrovigilance. Founded a number of companies really in ingredient discovery over the last 15 to 20 years. So if you don't mind, let's take a second and talk about sort of the work that you've been doing in this area in each of these companies, so people understand where you're coming at this from. So if you don't mind, the Supplement Safety Solutions, tell me about that, because I want other folks to understand it.
I kept being approached probably about 10 years ago now, 8 to 10 years ago, in my work in some of the other companies as a consultant, as well as a co-principal investigator and principal investigator for dietary supplement brands and ingredients that want to run human clinical trials. And they'd ask me, they said, look, there's this new dietary supplement law. It's a federal mandate. It's literally called the Dietary Supplement and Non-Prescription Drug Consumer Protection Act. And it was enacted in 2008, essentially to mandate that any dietary supplement brand that was going to be consumer facing and was going to be in interstate commerce needed to have a system in place to be able to pick up, surveil, and detect any adverse events, any safety signals, any product quality complaints, consumer complaints that may have come up after production, post-production. That's why it's called post-market safety. This is different from a federal law called the SHEA, which basically governs the dietary supplement industry in terms of GMP, good manufacturing practices, all of the manufacturing mandates that are enacted. So I approached my colleague and friend, Dr. Schmitz, at that point and said, hey, there's a real need here. Brands are going to need this service. Why not have experts that not only understand the ingredients, how they work, the mechanisms for the most part, because of all the work we've already done, but we're also physicians, and you are an expert on the pharma side, on pharmacovigilance. So why don't we apply the best practices and principles in pharmacovigilance and bring it into the dietary supplement space. So that's what we did. That's what Supplement Safety Solutions does for many dozens of brands that are in the industry that have sales of anywhere between startup all the way to over 1.2 billion a year in annual sales. So we have amassed a database of over 800,000 unique adverse events over the last, so it's a huge database that are adverse events that are simply associated. They're not causal, right? So it's just an association. Someone uses a product, they may feel they've got a nausea or vomiting, they may have a headache, they may get an allergic reaction, they may have any sort of change from their baseline status and call the company or email the company or get in touch with the company somehow and put in a complaint. That's an adverse event. So we handle that, we manage it. We also put in MEDRA, it's called Medical Dictionary of Regulatory Authority coding, so that we can codify all the adverse events. And at the end of the year, we have this really cool database for all the brands that we do this for that allows them to see in product by product, sometimes even flavor by flavor of the same product, to see if there's a little bit more of a signal of more adverse events in one product or the other. But really what it's there for is to pick up any unintended safety signal, or maybe there's an ingredient that could have had microbial contamination that was not picked up during the pre-market safety testing and is picked up post-market, and then we're able to pick up those signals. But there's a lot of noise, as you can imagine here. So it gives us unique insight, yeah.
I love the notion that you came to formulating these particular products we're speaking about with that massive background, and also your ability to really do ingredient discovery and then put those ingredients through the same process. And you also do testing on supplements to make sure that what people say is in the supplement is actually in the supplement, right? Which is important.
Yeah, so we do there. We don't really do analytical testing, but what we do is we actually test for safety and efficacy claims of ingredients, right? So yeah. So we've been doing that for almost 20 years at our CRO now, my partner.
Amazing. And CRO is a clinical research organization. Let's turn to the first product I want to talk about today. So there is a product that that we created through your team at Lifeforce called Peak Rise. And the idea here is this is the product you take in the morning when you get up. We'll be talking about other products like Peak Healthspan, Peak NMN, Peak Rest in this sequence of videos. So if you don't mind, what is your philosophy in creating Peak Rise and what's in it? And then we'll talk about the reason that these components are in it and what someone should expect from this product. So let's dive in. I'm going to be on listen mode and play as curious as I can.
Sure. We were tasked with helping to come up with the ideation of the various product categories, as you know, in conversation with you and Tony and the other co-founders. And one of the products that was felt like there's a big need state for a big problem to solve was that early morning sort of win the morning, activate your day, get your day started on the right foot, on the best foot forward, take your best foot forward. And it was something that was almost like a hybrid energy / nootropic cognitive, like a neuroenergy product, if you will. And that's what Peak Rise is really formulated to do. So some of the primary objectives of Peak Rise was we wanted something that could really tap into what we would call the neurochemistry of focus, attention, productivity, executive function, info processing speed, all the things that a high functioning professional or anyone really doing any sort of job that they want to be their best at, anything from a school teacher to a fitness professional to a coder, even a gamer and everything in between, or an entrepreneur. It was to basically sharpen people's mental edge. And we would do this by leveraging multiple neurotransmitter systems. These are the chemical compounds and molecules and that the neurons use to communicate with each other that allow us to do what we do from a cognitive function standpoint, everything from sensory to output. So we also wanted to enhance neurophysiology, but we wanted to do it in a way that avoided what often comes with other products on the market that try to give people that activated, stimulated feeling, which is the dreaded quote unquote crash. So we wanted to avoid the crash for sure. And so we felt like we could do this with a combination of bioactive ingredients that would be complementary. We would want to avoid there being too much redundancy or too much overlap, because really what you want when you're formulating a more sophisticated product with multiple ingredients is you want to tap into an orchestra, really, and you want to make sure that you don't have any one instrument, playing out of tune or playing too loudly versus, you don't want to hit one note or one tune too loudly. And that's what we wanted to do here. So generally what we did is we were able to put together a product with multiple bioactives that help to improve peak performance, everyday energy, focus, drive, productivity. And we can go into the specific ingredients now if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's run down, because there's a number of them.
Yep.
And typically when people take a supplement, they'll take a particular pill of a particular type, and you put together, like you said, an orchestra here to set to obtain a certain neuro vitality, if you would. So what's in it and why?
So we could see here at the top right of the supplement facts panel, we start off with some B vitamins that would otherwise seem very basic, but each of these B vitamins, if you see the specific form that we used, for example, the riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, thiamine is vitamin B1, the B6 that we use, and the B12, they're all, if you can see, they're all in what we call their most bioactive activated form. And what that means is these vitamins, when you consume them in other forms, like your typical one-a-day multivitamin, they're usually not going to be in these forms. These forms are going to be more premium in nature. They're typically a little more expensive, and in order to improve margins, most companies don't use these activated forms of the B vitamins. So the riboflavin.
Is that what you say, the 5-phosphate? Is that the activated version of it?
Correct. So that's the version that's closest to what the cell is going to use in the actual reactions that each of these B vitamins are helping to drive. So these B vitamins are really coenzymes, and they're used in dozens of chemical reactions that are important for the brain to do a lot of what it does, for the brain to be able to convert many of the nutrients we consume into key substrates, key ingredients, as well as converting them into those critical neurotransmitters we talked about before, things like dopamine, norepinephrine, even GABA, serotonin, acetylcholine. So all these neurotransmitters require a bevy of micronutrients like these B vitamins to help drive the synthesis of them. And these are also important in energy production as well, general energy production.
So if someone else might be taking a B vitamin complex, they won't need that if they're taking this.
Correct. If they're only taking that B vitamin complex for the purpose of making sure they have these activated Bs, you already have it here. Yep.
And when you, the serving size here says 3 capsules, and the percent daily allowance where it says 833%, for example, is that assuming you've taken 3 capsules?
That's assuming you take the full 3 capsule dose. Correct.
And how does a person decide to take 1, 2, or 3 capsules? You start with 3 or start with 1 and work your way up?
Yeah, we typically recommend starting low and then experimenting with how you feel with 1 capsule, and then going up to 2 capsules, and then eventually 3 capsules. This is where it takes, using sophisticated nutraceuticals like this takes a little bit of art and science. And this is where the art comes in, right? And the individuality and the personalization comes in. And this is where working with someone who's either a coach, a health optimization coach, or a guide can help get you to that right dose. But we always would recommend starting with 1, and then once you're comfortable with being able to say, well, I can take 1, 2, or 3 capsules, I can tolerate them, I'm not feeling overstimulated or overactivated or too fast, if you will, then you can decide based on the kind of day that you can anticipate having. So you know that you've got a big meeting or a big podcast or a big presentation, that might be a 3 capsule day, right? If you don't have too much going on, you're getting great sleep, and all your other lifestyle factors are in place, you're not too stressed, then maybe 1 to 2 capsules is enough to sort of still get you optimized in terms of your productivity and your mental energy, but won't take you overboard.
Beautiful. Let's go down the list and hit some of the other products.
The real highlight of what's driving this formula, where over 20 human clinical trials have actually been conducted, over 10 preclinical trials, so 30 studies in total, are substantiating this 3-ingredient combination, which is actually, you can see here that there's a form of caffeine here called Pure Caf. We went with an organic version of caffeine. It's a branded version because it's reliable. We know that it's not going to be adulterated. We know we're getting the caffeine that we're expecting in every batch and every lot. So we're using caffeine at 125 milligrams for all 3 capsules, which means each 1 capsule allows you to break that up into little over 40, 42, 41 milligrams or so.
And how much is in a typical cup of coffee? Do you happen to know offhand?
Yeah. So a typical, a grande Starbucks is usually about 100 to 150 milligrams. It can actually be that, the range, it can actually be that broad, actually, because, brewing, roasting conditions, all that, can affect it. But yeah, so we're still under your typical Starbucks grande, black, tall cup of coffee.
What else is your super ingredient in his?
Yeah, so there's Dynamine and TeaCrine, and we can actually go through this a little bit.
Sure.
So TeaCrine and Dynamine here so in the middle we have TeaCrine. The common name is TeaCrine. The scientific name is 1379 tetramethyluric acid. And the Dynamine on the right is methylliberine. It's sort of a chemical cousin of TeaCrine. And to the untrained chemist, someone who's not really a chemist, might see caffeine all the way on the left on the screen, TeaCrine in the middle, and Dynamine on the right, and say, wow, these are almost 3 identical structures. But there's some very minor nuances that are slightly different, and those minor nuances lead to major differences in terms of how they behave individually and how they behave together. And that's what we found. So caffeine on the left is 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. And what the name implies, and you can take from the name, is it's got 3 methyl groups, and you can actually see them here. I'm not sure if can you see my arrow here?
I can. And I memorized this when I was in medical school, because I figured if I was ever stranded on a foreign planet and I had to manufacture 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine, it'd be the one drug I would want to make sure I have access to.
That's a good move. That'd be a good call. So we can see that it's got these 3 methyl groups on the what we would call the purine ring, right? So these 3 compounds are also known as purine broadly. They're purine alkaloids. They're alkaloids because of their amide and nitrogen groups. So they're a little more basic, especially the xanthine. But what's interesting is, see, when you go from caffeine to these two other compounds, notice that the name changes
Mm-hmm.
from xanthine to a methyl uric acid. So they're methyl urates. And the reason they're methyl urates is because the main reason is this yellow box here. Now you've added a keto group or an oxo group, an oxygen, to the ring. And as a result, you've actually changed a lot of the dynamics and a little bit of the chemistry of the compound. And the other thing that changes the chemistry is now we have 137, now we have nine. So we have four methyl groups. This fourth one is added to the ninth carbon over here in blue, and over here in blue. And what's interesting about dynamine is it's actually missing one of the methyls that's present on TeaCrine, and now it got shifted over to this oxo group here, and it's actually called the methoxy group. So what this really does, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know what caffeine does for me.
Mm-hmm.
What is TeaCrine and Dynamine? How do I think about them? What are they stimulating?
Yeah, so they're interesting because they are metabolites of caffeine in the plant world. So any plant, not every caffeine producing plant in nature also makes TeaCrine and Dynamine. It requires a couple of other enzymes that not every plant has. So your standard coffee beans, the Arabica, Robusta, they don't have TeaCrine or Dynamine. They don't have methylliberine or TeaCrine. They only make caffeine, and it kind of ends there. The plant doesn't make anything beyond it. But other versions, like Coffea liberica, this other tea called Camellia Assamica Kucha. It's a Kucha tea used in the Hunan region in China. And actually, what's interesting about that type of tea that's different from other black teas or green teas is that tea is revered for students before exams are taking this product. They're taking that tea, and that tea actually contains these other alkaloids, in addition to a small amount of caffeine.
Increased focus and attentiveness.
Essentially, what they do is what caffeine does predominantly is it blocks these receptors known as adenosine receptors, right?
They make you sleepy.
Right? They make you sleepy when we get fatigued. You build up adenosine, you get
Yes.
sleep pressure, et cetera, fatigue pressure. What caffeine does, it blocks them. What TeaCrine and methylliberine do differently, it doesn't inherently block them at the orthosteric site. It's what's called an allosteric modulator of the receptor. So what it does is it's like mildly antagonizing the receptor, but not as strongly as caffeine. And so that's one of the features that makes TeaCrine and Dynamine not habit forming, no habituation, and no what's called tachyphylaxis when you stop taking them, or when you take them for a long period of time. You get a desensitization with caffeine. You don't get that with TeaCrine and methylliberine, and that's been shown in both animal models, in rodents, and in humans as well, that we've published and other groups have published.
Great.
And it also does one other important thing that caffeine doesn't do as well. It more directly activates the dopamine receptors, D1 and D2 dopamine. So it's more motivating. That's why we have here, functional energy to perform, and then motivation, executive function, and focus to succeed. It has more of a neural drive and mood and motivation effect than caffeine does alone. But the magic happens when you put them together. Yeah.
Like you said, win the morning, win the day. That's one of Tony's favorite sayings. Please continue.
Yeah. So basically, what they do, what both TeaCrine and Dynamine do, is very similar in terms of their mechanisms. The differences between them, though, is how quickly they do them. So you can think of TeaCrine as the long, slow, steady methyl uric acid, and then the Dynamine is fast. It's dynamic. It's fast acting, and it's still smooth at the end, but it definitely crosses the blood-brain barrier much faster because of the chemistry we went over before. That methoxy group makes it a little more lipid soluble, so it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And so you get it a little more upfront within 15 minutes. Caffeine, you also feel within 15 to 30 minutes. And then TeaCrine kicks in about 45 to 60 to 70 minutes later. So, and then that's why you get this very nice stacking of the kinetics of these compounds. So you don't get that big rush and then the big crash. You get a nice lift, and it's sort of like a nice takeoff, and then you get a nice landing, that smooth landing at the end.
Love it.
Yep, and we went over some of these mechanisms. There are also some others a little more advanced in terms of phosphodiesterase inhibition, which caffeine does a little bit, but actually TeaCrine, Dynamine have been shown to do both affect GMP and AMP levels. And this one is really interesting here too. You pick this up, sirtuin 3 activation. So it actually, TeaCrine and Dynamine both activate sirtuin 3 within the mitochondria. And this is something that we stumbled into after having introduced TeaCrine and Dynamine into the marketplace for about 7 years. And it was doing really well in the healthy energy and mental energy nootropic space. And then we found a very unique finding in a safety study in humans where we saw triglycerides, total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol drop. And it was supposed to just be a safety study for 8 weeks. And it was statistically significant. And these were already normal lipid, these are younger kids, 22 to 25, with normal lipids. So we said, there's something else going on here, and it must be happening at the liver, and it must be happening in the mitochondria in terms of how they're handling lipids. And that's what got us down this road of investigation. And we found, and other groups have found and confirmed, that there is much more to TeaCrine than just energy. It actually protects neurons. It's neuroprotective. There's been some work in the dopaminergic neuron models, Parkinson's models in rodents. It also seems neuroprotective there as well. So really fascinating stuff. So you're getting the mental energy, the mental focus, the productivity, and you're potentially getting healthier over time. This is not just one of those ingredients that it's got, you pull the lever on it when you need it, and it gives you a payoff, and then long term, you pay for it with some sort of deleterious, it's very safe, it's grass, and it actually potentially has long-term benefits to taking it as well.
And GRAS stands for?
Oh, GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe. And it's a very specific definition per the FDA that essentially means that the ingredient or the substance or the compound has been shown to have a high degree of certainty of causing no harm when consumed under the intentions, under the dose that you GRAS it for. It's called conditions of intended use over a lifetime. So safety over a lifetime.
All right, let's dive into some of these other claims here.
Yeah, so we and other groups have also done a lot of work on the combination that we talked about, caffeine, Dynamine, TeaCrine. And so these are some of the claims in human studies, human clinical trials, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, that have been published. They're in the public domain. They've been shown to improve cognitive performance during both mentally and physically demanding tasks. So they compared 300 milligrams of caffeine alone,
right,
which is an ergogenic dose. It's a dose that you'd expect would improve performance, versus 125 milligrams of the Dynamine TeaCrine in combination, like we use here. Here we use 135 milligrams because we showed later on at a study that adding a little more Dynamine actually improves the efficacy further. So essentially the dose that we're using here, 125 of caffeine with the 125 or 135 of the combo. And it showed that if you gave the combination, it allowed, whenever they pulled the athletes off of the treadmill during the middle of the soccer match or at the end of the soccer match, and they challenged them with cognitive battery of tests, they actually outperformed the caffeine group and the placebo group when they took the combination. Yeah,
and statistically significant in that regard.
Statistically significant, and actually, they at the end they did a time trial at the end, almost simulating like extra time, I guess. I'm not a soccer player, but I think that's what they call it when they go extra time. And so almost like overtime, right? The equivalent of overtime. And they actually also outperformed, significantly outperformed both placebo and caffeine only.
I'm sold
Yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
that. Are there any the other products
Yeah,
in
we
this
can
you want to
cover.
hit on?
Yeah, let's hit on actually, I would say the cognizin is a good one to hit on briefly, which is citicoline. So listeners and viewers who are, sort of purveyors of the nootropic space may be familiar with CDP choline. Um, it's essentially a building block of the ingredient that is used to make acetylcholine and to also make membranes in the brain, phosphatidylcholine. CDP choline has over 7 human studies, maybe it's up to 8 now, showing that it statistically increases perceived brain energy. It increases brain cell membrane formation, which has been tested using magnetic resonance spectroscopy, like MR technology, and also improves neuromotor speed, like finger tapping, et cetera. So it decreases error rate. So that's cognizin. The Sibelius sage has also been shown to, within 1 hour of use, so this is more acute, within 1 hour of use in young, healthy adult volunteers without any cognitive deficits, has actually been shown to improve working memory. And then finally, I think an extra, which is an extract of a botanical known as Alpinia galanga, galangal root extract, that's been shown to both amplify caffeine's focus and energy benefits without jitters, crash, no increase in blood pressure, heart rate, etc. So those are the highlights. Those are the big ones. But anything else we use in here, the IQ 200, which is also known as Kesem extract, it's indigenous to to Southeast Asia and Malaysia and Indonesia. That has human clinical data to back up cognitive performance claims. And so does Cereboost, which is a unique sort of standardized extract of ginseng, American ginseng.
Amazing. I mean, I think what's beautiful is your sort of the orchestra, as you called it, of ingredients put in here very clearly, and it's all about neurotropics in that regard. In other words, increasing your stamina, your mental acuity, your cognitive capability. It's the same reason a person typically will drink a cup of coffee in the morning, wake up, stay focused, and keep going. But this with a few other elements here. We talked about dosing, anywhere like start with 1, go to 2, go to 3. Is there a visceral feeling that a person might feel when they're taking these capsules?
Yeah, I think we call it's experiential. So basically, you should feel, quote unquote, feel a change in mental status and cognitive status, in your ability to feel zoned in or focused and mentally energized, sort of ready to take on tasks. You should feel it within the first dose.
Awesome. And if a person like me, I do a intermittent fasting, I'll typically eat late afternoon into dinner. I'll sort of eat in a 4-hour window, and then I'll fast till afternoon the next day. It's okay to be taking this particular supplement on a fast?
Absolutely okay. Yeah, nothing outwardly or inherently, adverse about any of these ingredients on a fast, but it can be highly individual from person to person. There are some people that are just a little more sensitive, right, on a fast in the morning. So I would just say, to certainly trial it and for yourself and see how you respond. I personally do the same thing. I kind of delay my first meal a little bit, just to be honest, almost if anything else. Ideally, you should probably do more of an early time restricted feeding based on the data, but it's just not as practical for me, right? So I do a similar thing, and then I also still enjoy my tea or my coffee. So what I personally do is I'll take 1 capsule on a fast in the morning, and then around midday I'll have my coffee with breaking my fast, usually after a workout, after I've done some work on the businesses or something academic, and then I'll have another capsule or two, depending on what I've got going on that day, in the middle of the day, actually, with my meal and with my coffee. So it allows you to sort of customize and auto-regulate depending on what your needs are and your preferences.
And just to maximize sleep, we'll be talking about sleep later when we talk about our Peak Rest product. How late should you not take this?
Yeah, I would recommend not doing it after 2 p.m. or at least 6 to 7, 6 to 8 hours prior to bedtime. You could always push that forward if you're either traveling, crossing time zones, or if you have a big event or some sort of activity that requires you to be kind of tuned in or turned on, if you will.
Well, listen, for me, this helped explain what's in it and why and what the objective is. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that, Hector. Anything else you want to mention before we close out on this product?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, I think that if it matters to people, there are no ingredients here that are going to show up on any of the banned substances list. For anyone who's competing in a WADA or USADA, event, tested event as an athlete as well. So I think that's probably the only other thing.
All right, here's my bottle of Peak Rise. And anyway, thank you. So grateful for just really the level of horsepower, intellectual horsepower putting into to crafting this. And I don't know if are there any other products like this on the marketplace?
There are products in this genre, I think, in the category, but I think it'd be hard pressed to find a product that puts together so many ingredients that are not there's not redundancy or overlap. It's pretty sophisticated in that regard, and that's still using doses that are this efficacious. Because honestly, when you and Tony and the other founders of Lifeforce put this together, it said, look, start with not really putting cost of goods constraints on a product. That's huge, because those are big guardrails that would probably prevent many other brands from putting together a product like this, even if they wanted to. So.
meaning it was like we're not going to get chintzy on like put the best components in,
right,
and give the best results you can,
right, even if it impacts margins a little bit, right? Yeah. So
let's close this out. Dr. Hector Lopez on Peak Rise. Thank you, my friend.
All right, thanks.
See you soon.